So, Bruce, what is your definition of utopia?
I don't have one. I think they're bogus. It's like a vision of heaven. It doesn't exist. It's like a vision of the afterlife. It's a phantom. There isn't any such thing. There never will be any such thing.
But it's such a driving force in science fiction.
No, science fiction's got a lot of nonsense in it. Most weird ideas are just weird ideas, you know?
Plato, going back to, one of the first commentators on the idea of the perfect state, said the only way to make the state perfect is to throw out the poets. You throw out the imaginers. Now that's a rotten definition of a perfect state, but it's one of many visions.
Throw out the poets, but the perfect state utopia was created by a poet, Sir Thomas More. More, the English poet, author, and probably the only lawyer politician to ever achieve sainthood, wrote Utopia in 1516 after hearing stories of the new land across the Atlantic Ocean. 2 centuries later, in that new land, politicians drew up a constitution in order to form a more perfect union. And 2 centuries after that, the perfect political state was the dream of Hitler and Lenin. Utopia. Can you get there from here? Nancy, take us to a better place.
Rising anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe has voted English only sign 40,000 tons of oil with PCBs blew up the ozone layer today.
Standing by for solid rocket booster separate.
Darn tape jam. In a perfect world, this wouldn't happen. Greetings, prisoners of gravity. This is Commander Rick. Living in this cramped, tiny satellite, I don't have enough room for improvement. But I see on my TVs that on Earth you're still struggling against social conflict, economic ills, and moral decay. Those very same problems inspired Thomas More to coin the Latin word utopia, a pun on the perfect place and no place. More's mythical land was free of poverty, crime, and injustice. Today, crime and injustice are being battled by mythic superheroes in comic books, and my favorite utopia in comics is in Miracleman. Back in the early 80s, Alan Moore resurrected the British character Marvel Man and transformed him for the UK publication Warrior. Alan penned 3 graphic novels worth of gripping action before handing the writing reins over to a then-unknown Neil Gaiman, who, with artist Mark Buckingham, maintained the excellence of those first 3 books.
I've thought a lot about Utopia. I think anybody who's interested in society and has any sort of social vision, somewhere along the line they've formulated their perfect utopia. And I wanted to examine that whole idea of utopias and see what it was about. And I think the conclusion that I came to is that utopia, if it's going to be anything, has to be a verb rather than a noun. Utopia is not a state that you achieve. Utopia has got to be the journey towards that state. If you ever arrive at that state of perfection, then you've reached death and stagnation. There's nothing to do but die once you're perfect. And I think that that's what I wanted to say with Miracleman, that if you take the superhero to its extreme, this utopian world where everybody's a superhero, then there is something very morally dead and static about the whole thing that is unpleasant and is anti-life, is anti-human. That ultimately the superhero dream is anti-human.
The first part is definitely right. Utopia is a verb. One utopias. Happiness is the condition of travelling towards something. It's not when you arrive at the goal, all there is a strange feeling of letdown normally. But I don't think we actually do arrive in utopia in Alan's world. Yes, you build a utopia, but then you fill it with people. It doesn't work. It's like building a perfect office block and then sending people in, and pretty soon they're putting photos of their nieces up on the walls and graffitiing the toilets and leaving their coffee cups out. And you don't have utopia anymore because it's full of people.
What we've been trying to do on Miracleman initially is to
completely avoid dealing with Miracleman himself and the other central characters in the story. We thought that Alan had done quite enough to sort of confuse and challenge the readers already, and he'd set up this marvellous sort of utopia where people could live out their dreams and do whatever they wanted to, because Miracleman can make anything happen now. And we wanted to see what effect this was actually going to have on the day-to-day lives of the ordinary people in Miracleman's world. So for the first 6 books of Miracleman, we've been just playing around, taking little lives, a woman who's had a miracle child and how that's affected her life. Just what it's like to go to school in the new miracle world, just little things like that. And building up little dramas on their lives.
I wanted to pull back very, very, very hard from Miracleman. Alan had done the first 3 books, which basically follow him from journalism to godhood. So I wanted to pull back hard. I wanted to examine the society almost from underneath. It is a very unsatisfying utopia, because, I mean, the Golden Age is basically a little section of tragedy, a selection of tragedies. They're very sad little stories, even the ones that end happily, especially the ones that end happily. They're not reassuring stories. They're not comfortable. Yes, the world has changed, but people continue to be people. And that is their triumph, and that is also their tragedy.
In his biography at the back of Miracleman Book 4, Neil traces his interest in utopias to science fiction author R.A. Lafferty, who wrote Past Master. And in the introduction to Miracleman Book 4, SF author Samuel R. Delany says that Neil's Miracleman is the most delicate and touching tales of some half-dozen very human men and women. And Delany ought to know about utopias. After all, he invented one on Neptune's moon, Triton. Delany wrote Triton partly in response to Ursula K. Le Guin's award-winning novel, The Dispossessed, which was subtitled An Ambiguous Utopia. Delany subtitled Triton An Ambiguous Heterotopia. Both books could be subtitled How a Sex Change Can Teach You Some Pretty Profound Lessons About Life. Why did you decide to focus on a sexual utopia in Triton?
Well, what I decided to do is to focus on what I thought was a political utopia, and I thought that the politics would have to include the things that would make most of us happy. And since so much of our lives, so much of our mental lives has to do with worrying about the sex that's available to us, I figured that's something that had to be taken care of in any place that was going to be fun to live. And so I tried to set up the template of a place where the basic complaints that so many people have, which boil down to there is not enough sex of the sort I like that's available to me, were taken care of.
When you were writing the book, did you look to any of the non-science fiction utopias, like, say, Thomas More's classic work, as templates?
No, I really didn't.
That surprises me.
It had always struck me that science fiction really was very different from science fictional thinking was very different from utopian thinking. Utopian thinking, to me, seems to start by positing an overall structure and then fitting everything within that. I couldn't tell you how the government of Triton actually functions. I couldn't tell you, what office is on what floor of City Hall and what office is right next to it, and how they would have, how the whole governmental structure would have to be set up, what officers and that it had. In a utopia, usually the people can tell you, the author of a utopia can tell you how the whole governmental structure actually functions. I can't tell you that about Triton. I can just, I give you what it feels like and smells like to walk down the street.